Hello, and welcome to the Don't Stop the Education series presented by Sennheiser Sound Academy. We're happy you joined us today for another episode of Crew Call with the team from Ed Sheeran. We're really happy you joined us for this one. I'm Tim Moore. I'm here with our colleague Andy Edgerton, who will be your primary host today, and I'll be stepping back and helping manage some of the questions and get those into the conversation. So please feel free to enter questions and be part of this conversation. Andy, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Very excited for this one. Thanks for joining, everyone. I'm going to start straight away from the screen here. You can see who we have. I'm going to welcome Chris Marsh, who is production manager and front of house. If you could just give us a quick intro, Chris, and how long you've been with Ed Sheeran, how you got started, that kind of thing.
Hi everyone. I've been with Ed for a long time. I can't exactly remember when I joined, but it was during the first album campaign, brought on board by Mr. Friend. I've been a sound engineer for as long as I can remember. I wanted to be one since I was about 15 years old. So I'm not going to tell you how many years that's been because I'll give far too much away. And took on the roles of production manager on a few tours before I met Ed as a way of having something else to do with your day. As a sound engineer, you don't fill your day with an awful lot of stuff. Sound check and showtime is really all you have. So I took on doing production manager duties, and when I started with Ed, it was very much a theatre role, and of course we ended up with stadiums. So yeah, that's me. That's where I've been.
That's great. Thank you so much. And I'm going to move on to Mark Friend, who is the tour manager for Ed. And how long have you been involved, Mark?
Hi, Andy. I started working with Ed in 2010. It was 8 weeks prior to the commercial release of the first single, The 18. So when I started working with Ed, it was me and Ed in a car driving around the UK playing pubs and clubs. And obviously 10 years later, we find ourselves playing, the biggest venues around the world. I've not been a tour manager for that long, only for about 11 and a half years. I predominantly started my career in music companies. So I've come in a slightly different way than a lot of other people do into the industry.
Amazing, thank you, and thanks for joining. That's great. I'm going to move on to Matt Jones, who's actually in Melbourne, Australia, which I was unaware of until just now. So it's very early for Matt. Thanks for joining, Matt. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey with Ed, please?
I don't know if you can see me. I've been with Ed for about 3-4 years now. And I've been doing lighting for about as long as I can remember. I've been doing lighting design since I left high school, really. So my journey started with Ed at the end of the Multiply campaign, and I've been lighting director since the start of the Divide tour in 2017.
Fantastic, thank you. Thanks for joining us. I know it's early for you. And finally, Dave White, and thanks, Dave, for organising this, because you've been behind getting the lads together for all this. So thank you so much for that. Tell us a little bit about your journey with Ed Sheeran, please.
Yeah, hi. So I started with Ed and all the team in 2014 as a PA tech, working with Chris and the audio team, and then that was mid towards the end of the Multiply tour. And then when Divide Tour came around, I got a new mysterious role as well as part of the PA team in dealing with Ed's loop pedal.
Well, we're going to ask you about that a little bit later on. Thanks, Dave. So what we're going to do here, we're going to take you a little bit down memory lane, but to show some images that we have to kind of just build what it's like to be involved with a production of this size and an overview of what goes on with it. So if I just show, bring in the first image here, obviously there's a huge amount of crew that make these shows happen. So Mark or Chris, could you possibly tell us like how many departments and people does it take to put on a tour of this size, and then sort of like the carps and the lighting department, the audio department, the catering, those kinds of things. Could you give us a little bit of an overview of that, please?
Chris, I'm gonna, I'll push it to Chris, who's sort of runs all the crew. Basically, he'll have the numbers off the top of his head.
Thank the number, the exact figures maybe not, but it's to put on a tour the size of Ed's stadium tour. took quite a few people. Departments don't change much as you go from arenas up to stadiums, bar adding on steel teams and maybe advanced production teams. But it's effectively it's a sound team, there's a lighting team, a video team. We have a stage management team, obviously production and tour management office, as well as the artists, a team himself. But we also, we have 2 catering teams, and we have 2 steel teams. So, and obviously an awful lot of truck drivers. And on the stadium run, no bus drivers. The way you travel is really much more by flying, but on the arena tour, obviously bus drivers as well. So there's an enormous amount of people. I can't remember exactly, but certainly we certainly won the biggest stadium tour in terms of numbers. We were 40 odd people touring as a production team, with another 20 odd in each team going around. And I remember we had about 50 trucks on the road, all in all. So
fantastic.
A fair few people.
That's great. I'm just going to skip forward just because of something that you said there. That's obviously, when we see these images here, and you're talking about steel teams and what have you, this is obviously a touring stage. Is there like an A stage and a B stage that kind of goes in front and gets built in advance?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We actually ended up, because of the nature of this being a worldwide tour and wanting to fit, we'll try and get to as many territories as we could in the timescales. We actually ended up with 4 of these systems. We ended up with 2 started in Australia, whilst 2 were waiting to go out on the road in Europe. Obviously, as a team, we can fly around a lot quicker than all that steel can travel. So yeah, and then we ended up with the Australian systems, ended up going to America. But yeah, these were bespoke structures built for this show. The thing that was different about this show to most shows is all of our weight was right on the downstage edge, where most shows have very heavy upstage screens and such like, and have massively deep stages to accommodate bands. We didn't need any of that. We just had Ed on the downstage edge, so the whole show was right down the edge on the cantilever. So there weren't any off-the-shelf opportunities available. So yeah, bespoke system was built and toured in 2 systems of people, but 4 systems of steel.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm just going to jump back here and talk a little bit about maybe go over to Mark. Organising people's day, and obviously Chris looks after the crew and sorts their times out. Are you responsible for kind of running how sort of Ed's day looks, or maybe your day looks, and everyone else around that? Because I can see a day sheet here.
Yeah, as you said, Chris, that day sheet's predominantly from our production department. That basically gives everybody on the production side, sets out their day from sort of the moment they wake up to the moment they go to bed. As a tour management team, we predominantly look after Ed, who doesn't have a schedule apart from you need to be at the venue at this time. His day-to-day changes at the drop of a hat and the blow of the wind. But he literally, we tell him what time to be at the venue, and he gets to the venue at that time.
Brilliant, fantastic. And obviously we have a set list here. Again, does Ed, once the kind of set list is up and running, does it change a lot, or is it kind of set in stone a little bit?
Well, Chris will run through the set list with Ed most show nights pre the show. The majority of it stays the same, but over the years, Ed has a favourite trick of changing things mid-show. Sometimes on a whim, sometimes just to wind people up because he knows that they don't like certain songs, or something's happened to him that day, or he's done an interview and someone's mentioned another song. So you'll often find, this down the set list as it actually, I'll go to Dave and there's various squiggles and crosses and things written over and changed. And, poor Trevor, our guitar tech's running on stage, Ed saying, next song I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that, then I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that. Trev comes running off, tells Dave. Dave tries to get hold of Chris, gets hold of Chris, and then he changes it before the next song comes around anyway.
So that sounds like a lot of fun. I've had the experience of that actually, so I can sympathise with that.
That photograph there has to be one of the cleanest set lists we've ever had, actually. That's pretty unchanged. It's usually got squiggles all over it.
I think that's pre-show, Dave, rather than post.
It is daylight.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm going to bring in Matt here, because obviously Matt's responsible for the lighting, but there's obviously there's a lot more to it than that. What we see here, Matt, and again, this is for Chris and Mark. How does it go from the initial on a piece of paper or a CAD drawing to kind of getting it to what we see on the screen here? What processes are involved in that?
It's changed over the 10 years I've been working with Ed, and sort of, I think Chris joined in 2011, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I think I was just looking myself. I think it was, yeah.
I think it was 2011.
Yeah.
So when I first started, there wasn't anything. We turned up, we plugged the guitar in, we plugged the we plugged this machine in, and then we went. Chris came in and we started having a bit of production, and it was always a little bit of a sort of, what have we got, what have they got type of scenario. As it got bigger, we obviously brought in a show designer, and sort of the process now is Chris and the show designer, that's Mark Cunniff, actually sitting there in the check shirt. It's not Jay Leno.
Are you sure?
We don't think it's Jay Leno.
No one's ever seen them together, though.
Yeah, well, I don't think Mark's got the cars Jay Leno has. Yeah, so Chris and Mark Cunniff will sit and have a pre-conversation about designs and ideas. You know, after they've spoken to Ed, they'll go away, come back with concepts. The concepts are then taken to artist and manager. They're agreed on a principal basis. It then comes sort of back into my world, and with Chris talking about how much things cost. That's very much my traditional role of being a tour manager has very much changed into sort of tour manager stroke tour accountant. I'm about the pounds, shilling and pence. So then, you know, we cost it out. We look at the costings. It gets approved, and then I'm going to chuck it to Chris now, because then it's the making of it.
Some of that comes around in those early days. I've got a really great relationship with Mark Cunniff, where he'll come up with ideas, and even before we send them to Ed, we tend to add some practical elements to it at that point, so we don't just go with these wild drawings that ultimately aren't either going to be affordable or practicable to tour. So we have a great relationship where I try to throw some reality into him. But the practical elements of getting that whole tour together are, in my mind, at every stage, because there's no point in having this wonderful design if ultimately it can't be afforded, or it can't be loaded in and loaded out in the time allowed. So you have to always take into consideration the schedule, and the schedule can affect how much everything's going to cost. So it's a constant evolving thing until, you know, we end up with agreeing the whole thing, building it, and then introducing Matt to the process to program everything in a way that Mark wants it to look.
Well, let's bring in Matt here then. So, I mean, this looks incredible, but give us an idea of how many fixtures we're looking at here.
Cool. Going back from memory, I think we had 134 of the Claypaky Mythos in there. Then that's what you see on the front surface there.
Yeah.
Then, but actually behind all those screens and lighting, there's actually some other fixtures that are sub-hung underneath the mother grid. There's some Kinesis Unicos. I think we've got 16 of those, and some atomic strobes. And that gives an additional element when you see the Kinesis Pods that you've got there, the four of them, they come down, you get the light beams coming from behind those. And then there's some audience lighting as well, where we've got 56 the Claypaky G4 beam washers.
Yeah,
that's just trying
pictures, isn't it?
Yeah. And that tries to just bring in the audience a little bit into the feel of the show. I mean, it as well as lighting it from the front, it just sort of gives that encompassing feeling for the audience to be lit from behind as well.
From their side, and obviously we can see the video wall in behind here. Is this a separate department who look after the content, or is it do you have control of that?
Yes and no. I mean, it's a separate department, but lighting and video, I guess you could say, they're intrinsically linked. I mean, that one goes without, they go together.
Yeah.
And there's a video department run by Phil Mead, who's the video director, and a whole team of guys that set up the screens. And Phil predominantly looks after the video cutting of all the images, and he maintains the media server Disguise. But all the triggering during the show for the media content comes from the lighting console. So
yeah,
I basically control the visual elements that you see live during the show.
Yeah, the video content that's created then, is that sorry, I forgot, he's Mr. Mead. What was his first name?
Phil Mead. Yeah.
Phil Mead, sorry. Does Phil Mead, would he create that content, or would Ed have some input into that, or is it just a case of showing ideas and seeing what works, or is it a collaboration between all of you?
Mark Cuniff is the creative director on that front, and the content's created by two content houses, We Are Shop and Moment Factory. And Mark Cuniff himself creates a bit of the content as well. We also use what we call notch effects that overlay the live video image that enables us to manipulate Ed's images. So you can see it's got a blue tinge there, but you can get like a smoke and water effect that you can see on the, some of the images there that manipulate his live image and react to his actual movements.
Yeah, brilliant. And you talked about the Kinesis Pods, so that's what makes these pods move up and down to sort of create different looks, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that also creates a bit more of an intimate feeling for the audience. For some of the bigger moments, it brings in not just an intimate feeling, but it brings in another element of wow to the show, I guess. Seeing 4 pods come down like that, it changes the dynamic of the show. It allows us to do a little bit more with the show, and for a lot of people to see something like that come down, it's not really expected unless it's in the show.
Yeah, looks incredible. Is that a lot of programming of refocusing and that kind of thing as they come in for the different look? You're having to move them. I guess it's on scenes, is it?
Yeah, so we still record palettes and positions, but naturally, as the fixtures start to tire and get a bit older, the positions become a little less accurate. So it is a nightly process of having to refocus the rig, and it does mean sometimes we need to bring the Kinesis Pods into their position to refocus that position, but it is quite a mammoth task when you've got 134 mythos to refocus that rig.
I was going to say, and the first time that you used this and when Ed saw it, was he like, oh, it's like a spaceship coming down or something? What's his reaction?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but I do remember he was a bit overwhelmed by it. I think he definitely
obviously he'd been very much part of seeing all the visuals pre-tour, and it wasn't quite the beast you're looking at there when we first did it, because it was in the arena, so it was a little bit smaller, but still the difference between seeing it on paper and seeing it in real life was quite a shock to him. Although Ed's traditionally, Ed he's even said himself, he stands on stage, looks forward and performs to his audience. What we do to back him with visuals and everything else, he kind of felt a bit of a disconnect to, because he was all about his performance to the audience. So there was always a thing about, really, he doesn't play with the set and the video and the lighting, he plays and it backs him, a bit like the equivalent of a band, I guess, visually. But as the tour progressed, he became very aware of things, and there were times where he'd turn around and suddenly realize there was a pod there that he hadn't realized was there before, and things like that. He certainly enjoys all that and enjoys the way that things come down and become quite intimate around him.
Initially, he also used to get quite distracted by his own video.
Yeah, he'd look back and see his own face.
We can see the Kinesis here. So obviously it's up there and it's down there. So it's obviously moving up into those gaps. And just some different looks that we've got here. Looks incredible. Again, I guess this is the intimate look where it comes down and makes the stage a bit smaller.
Yeah, it brings it in, and it just sort of, as I said, it also gives it that wow factor as well.
Yeah. So from these programmings, then I bet you're looking at these pictures thinking, oh, I know what that song is. I know where that is.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Another great shot of it there, and I think we've got one. we've got one from distance, so you can obviously see the effect there as well. Amazing. Thank you so much. I think I have a question from Tim. Tim's going to jump in, and I think he's got something from the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for letting me jump in. One of our guests had some keen eyes on your set list, and I may know what the answer is to this, but on this set list, there's a couple of places where it says boom. What's that?
Oh,
Anybody want to jump in?
That photo was on my set list, so that's my little scrawlings for my cues. So Ed starts each song on various channels on the looper pedal. So sometimes we just make sure that he's set up before he's ready to go. So the first press of the record, he's on the right channel, ready to go. So boom is my little note to myself to make sure he's on the boom channel. It's it's quite simple.
Oh, right on.
It's really important that he is on the right channel too, because each channel of his loop pedal is EQ'd differently and has different things that happen to them. Boom is something that we refer to when he bangs the guitar, and we get that kick drum effect from him. And if he was to do that at the beginning of a song on any other channel, it would sound like he was hitting a saucepan, as opposed to that.
Gotcha.
So it's very important that channel's right.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Now you see that shows where I would have been wrong, because I was guessing it had something to do with pyro, which is why I put it in right here. So I thought there's a big clap somewhere. So thanks, guys. There'll be some more later, but thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, Tim. That's great. Just some more images of the looks here. So obviously we've got the riser is lit as well, and obviously these fixtures are lit behind as well. Looks amazing.
So we had LED trim tape that lit up the set as well. So it's not just the lighting fixtures that we had. We also had the set that was able to be lit RGB, and that usually was tied quite closely with the content as well. The content didn't alter the color of it. It just, when we programmed it, it was part of the process that we made those the lighting and the LED tape to sort of try and match in with the content on the screen.
Yeah, looks stunning. It really does. And obviously it transitions well from kind of daylight down into as it starts getting darker.
Yeah.
And it just obviously what you're saying about Ed, it kind of backs him. This is just a perspective from what Ed's looking out. So there's just a single follow spot on him that just follows him everywhere.
We've got predominantly we've got one on his right, which you see there, but we also do have a second one on his left over there.
Yeah,
that's usually just to sort of bring out the shadow a little bit more, because the notch effect that I was talking about before, it works a little bit better when he has some shadowing on his face. So we try and light him predominantly from his right, and then just sort of fill it a little bit on his left, just so cameras can still pick him up in the video cuts that they do. But it also, it just having that slight difference allows the notch effects to have a greater impact.
Fantastic. That's great. And I noticed the delay towers have got fixtures on as well. Is that part of, obviously Ed likes to see his crowd, like you said, there's a lot of crowd lighting. Is this just to illuminate the crowd a bit more?
Yeah, it's just also to give it that more encompassing feeling for people in the audience as well. Make them feel like they're more involved and drawn
like on the stage, yeah.
Yeah, because those actually aren't pointing out towards the audience behind the towers. It's backlighting the people in the front there. It's just to give them a little bit more, and it's also so when we do a rear shot, you get that nice image there.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much. That's great. Just a few more images from sort of Ed's perspective, if you like, before we move on to the audio department, which again is Chris. You started speaking about the channels being EQ'd separately and things there. So let's just talk, obviously when you're at front of house, this is your position, looking at Ed over here. Can you tell us a little bit about his mix and like maybe how many channels there is, those sort of things, the little overview bits?
Yeah, there aren't that many channels as you'd expect, because it's a guy with an acoustic guitar, so there really aren't that many channels. But the loop pedal, where originally it was one channel that everything built up and up and up on, we developed it further, and I now receive several channels of the loop pedal. I then break that down further so that I'm able to affect each channel in different ways. the boom channel was a great example. That comes to me as one thing. I break it into two, so I'm able to control effectively lows and highs separately on faders and not have to sort of reach for EQ to change things. So all in all, Dave will know better than me, but I think, as I remember, the last channel count was probably something like 18 channels, including spares, wasn't it?
Yeah, pretty much raw audio and then returned audio. We like to try and keep, well, it just ended up under 24. I think it was about 17, 18 channels back to you at front of house.
Yeah, if we include the other thing that we did awful lot of was in terms of the ST7 was dealing with out there was a matrixing system where, of course, Ed's on a wireless system. He's on a Sennheiser wireless system. He's on a 9000 series, which for me, outside of this conversation, really is the ultimate of radio systems because it sounds like it should. The guitar sounded like a guitar and it could deal with all the things that we needed it to do. But we had to deal with a way that all those channels of guitars, and he was swapping guitars sometimes because of a broken string, sometimes with tuning issues or just different tunings for each song. We had to change that to being his one input into the loop pedal, and we dealt with that at front of house as well. So yeah, front of house, as well as the channels that the audience heard, there was a matrixing that happened between all the different guitars to get them to the loop pedal.
Yeah, fantastic. And there's a little bit of outboard going on down here as well. Have you got a few little toys that you like to use?
Yeah, not much. I've got a couple of reverb units that I really like the sound of, and I always like to have a vocal channel preamp with EQ that I can grab. It's just, even though the big style digital consoles are very tactile, it's still much better I'm much more used to turning to my left and grabbing an EQ for a vocal out of the old analog days. And one particular tool is a max bass, which is a unit that I use. It can be used in many ways, but I use to be able to increase some sub bass or decrease sub bass according to what song Ed's on, because some of his songs are very mellow and ballady, and some of them really require the low end to be very punchy. And again, it's not something you want to be. I don't necessarily want to be programmed into the console, and I definitely don't want to be grabbing on an EQ. So I have presets on that does that. But yeah, apart from that, that's it.
Fantastic. Just before I jump to the next one, I think Tim's got a question he wants to jump in with.
I actually have two. Thanks again, Andy. While we're on the topic of channels, you mentioned that you're wearing both hats with monitors and front of house. Do you split the channels for your monitor inputs for Ed, so you have different things going on for what's going to his in-ears and his wedges, or are you just sending off of the primary channel?
Good question. Totally split. Everything is split, so we can EQ everything differently. There's no way Ed could hear the EQ that I put in the PA through a monitor and it makes sense to him. It needs to be very different. He gets a lot of sub bass back from the PA naturally, so everything in his wedges are generally fairly much high cut. As you look at the console there, to the left of me is everything front of house. The middle is obviously the VCAs. To the right is only monitoring. His wedges are one layer, his in-ears are another layer on there, and the third layer down is the matrixing for the guitars in and out. But yeah, absolutely everything is completely independent.
Good. And the other is just a general question for lighting, audio, and every aspect. What's the complete load in, dump the trucks, and build time before you're comfortable going to show? How long does it take you to build that whole stadium tour?
It kind of very much depends on the circumstances you're in. We've done stadiums where you can put all the trucks directly on the pitch, unload them, and it's a sunny day, and you can start loading in at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we're all done by sort of 3 o'clock in the afternoon. There are other days where the trucks can't get very close, and you have to shuttle things into the stadium, and it's pouring with rain, and it takes an extraordinary amount longer, and we could still be there at 10, 11 o'clock at night with Matt Jones complaining at us because he's ready to focus and we're not ready for him. But the one thing is we certainly can't load in day of show because of the need to program, because of the need to do stuff, and the need to have darkness. We always would do it the day before, and you use show day for making sure everything's ready for the show, which again, weather can be a major factor on how long it takes to do everything and do support band sound checks. So yeah, it does take a load-in day, but that day could be 8 hours and it could be 15. It all depends.
Gotcha. And one more from Mark here. As this grew from, as you said early, a very, a theater-sized tour into where you are now, how long did it take to choose and assemble the team that you have put together here, and what's your process in thinking about that?
That becomes a natural process. I mean, I was the first one in. I done everything. My partner Amanda was in as well, sort of quite early on, within 6 months. Then once the project starts getting bigger, you have to think what's the best for the artist and who the right people are, the right fit are, who who's going to work. Ed has a very good ethos when it comes to work. He works extremely hard. We made a promise to each other when we first started we'd be the hardest working and nicest people on the road. So that was an ethos we wanted to carry through out everybody. So, there's people you meet along the way. My wife knows Chris really well, worked with him on various projects. We thought Chris would be brilliant to come in as front of house and production manager. And then, the team started building throughout then. Chris worked with various other people. Some people have come in and it's not worked. When you're starting to get up to sort of 50, 75 sort of standard touring crew, plus your various catering departments, steel departments, plus your locals, plus your promoters, we're up to sort of 200 plus people to put on a show, excluding, local security, ticket takers, etc. So it's very much trying to find the right people with the right attitude. Some people come in with the wrong attitude, they don't last that long. And there's other people that have started off, our stage manager now, who's probably one of the best stage managers in the world, started off as guitar tech and has worked his way up through the ranks. So there's no rhyme or reason to it, but it's finding the right people for the right artist.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you guys all. Andy, back to you.
Great piece of advice. Thank you. Thank you so much. Just going to move back on now and start bringing in Dave into the conversation a little bit, because we've got we're going to talk about the sort of system design really, and that kind of aspect of things. Who I guess it's Chris doing front of house is putting the system together, but then Dave, you help him with that?
Not really, no. Well, obviously Chris is involved and helps. We've got our main systems engineer who's called Charlie Alban. So he's the guy that comes up and does all the measurements and the plots and the distribution per day. I work with Charlie to help install the equipment, one of the PA crew as well. So the hangs you can see there, we put up and down every day. So typically there's 3 hangs aside, 1 sub side main hang, and then 4 pitch delays, as well as the infills, the outfills, the subs. So Charlie will typically turn up at about 7 o'clock in the morning with his laser measure and his binoculars, and be very, very thorough about what angles go into what PA every day, and then he'll wander around with a microphone and get us to tweak things, half angles and bits and pieces. So the actual system deployment is very much his bag, and then during the day he'll go around, EQ everything, and then Chris and him will take a walk around before we do a line check and make sure that all of the areas in the arenas and the stadiums that need to be hit are getting fully filled, and both those parties are very, very happy about it. So yeah, Charlie is the sort of system deployment man and very much heads up the audio department on the road, really.
Fantastic, thank you. Great comprehensive answer there. And I guess we'll just jump back to what we touched on with Tim there about Ed, that Chris is doing monitors for Ed from front of house as well. So obviously he's actually got in-ears but physical monitors as well. Could you just run us a little bit through what we're looking at here, and maybe how, if Ed needs something changing on stage, it gets relayed, or if it just sort of stays the same, that kind of thing?
Well, it's yeah. So what you're seeing there is he used to be he started doing clubs and pubs and things with knackered old monitors and whatever he could get. So he was very much used to that. And as we grew bigger, we encouraged him to use in-ears, because obviously the stage sound was getting louder and louder to overcome the audience noise, and so he could hear what he was doing. And of course, hearing what he's doing is absolutely critical to him, because the looper is all about timing, and it's all about being absolutely spot on. Otherwise, you destroy what it was you were building in the loop. And we ended up in, I think, somewhere in South America. I can't remember where. I was in like Bogota or something, and we were in a marquee, and the audience was so loud he couldn't hear anything, absolutely nothing. And we were there for 2 nights. And the second night, and after that night, he said, "I have to wear in-ears." So ever since, he's worn both in-ears, and he realized he needs it so he can get his timing and his pitching right. But he does like to drop an ear out and hear the crowd, but still hear what's going on. So the wedges have stayed, and the wedges have stayed as well, because, heaven forbid something went wrong with the in-ears. There is something on stage that's live. We'll give him a backup, because there is nothing else. There's no live drummer or anything he can sort of try to time off of. And the subs are there because he likes to feel the punch of it all, something that the in-ears don't quite give. With respect to him coming back to me with any information during guitar changes between songs, if there's anything, he'll relay it via the guitar tech. That goes to Dave. Dave usually speaks to Charlie at front of house whilst I'm mixing, and Charlie relays it to me the next convenient opportunity. But generally, there's not anything with Ed. The one thing about him is, it's not what he's hearing is not a mix that anyone would want to hear, really. He hears what he needs to hear to make it accurate and do what he needs to do. And the one important thing for him is he doesn't want anyone messing with it or trying to beautify it or keep up with him or correct it. If there's a mistake in there in the loop, he wants to hear that mistake so he can do it. So I think one of the key things about me mixing monitors from front of house is I don't touch it. And therefore there's a consistency that he can rely on. Even if the consistency is something wrong, he relies on that being as it is throughout the whole song. So it works really well.
Fantastic. And just a few more images of you at front of house, then.
Charlie next to me. I don't know why he's laughing.
I notice on the SD7 here, you've got the camera feed.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to keep an eye on. Any reason for that? Just to get a bit of closer? It's
really, really handy, particularly when we were doing arenas and you're on the floor with the audience, and Sod's Law, the 6'7" guy and his girlfriend and their 3 6'8" kids stand directly in front of the house, and I can't see a thing. And although to mix sound, I haven't necessarily got to see anything. I need to be able to see where he is. If he goes too close to the front edge of the stage, to be able to pull down front fills, or even notice when he's broken a string. Or sometimes when we say about the set list changing, I can see from the close up when he stands chatting to the audience and has his hands on the frets in a certain way, he's not playing the song he was going to play. So it just helps me to sort of have a heads up as to what's going on. I can probably be more proactive because of that screen rather than reactive to what I hear.
Let's go back one. Sorry. With regards to the set changes, are you mixing on snapshots there? Or are you?
Yeah.
You are. So does that become he's doing that song and you're banking through, and the same with Matt?
Yeah, massively.
Yeah.
An awful lot of what I think Matt would agree, an awful lot of what we do is left to being less programmed and more fingers, so that we can react to changes. Even within a song, there are changes. We tend not to snapshot within a song. We think we both run everything very much on our fingers. But there has to be a couple, as Matt does as well, a couple of go-to things, whereas we think he's going to this song, we're not sure, go to that one, and we'll be able to, the worst terminology, blag it from that point, depending on whatever song he's got. Matt, it's the same for you, right?
Absolutely, and because it's not timecode, we can't rely on a timecode track to trigger a song for us. We need to be able to be watching what he's doing and be able to jump to a song. If he changes it mid-set, it's usually a panic of me just trying to hit the go button to that appropriate song. So yeah, we don't have timecode that can sort of get us out of trouble when he does decide to change a set.
Yeah. As well to that, I mean, one song can last one day.
Andy, this is why Ed's truly.
It's what? Sorry.
Go on, Mark.
I was going to say that sort of the fact that sort of what Chris and Matt have just said about how they run their show, it's due to the tribute of Ed being such an amazing musician and literally making his mind up on that second on stage what he's going to do. You know, we've worked with other people that everything's very choreographed, it's set, nothing changes. It can, as we said earlier, Ed changes at a drop of a hat because he has the skill to do that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I guess reacting to the crowd as well. If someone's at the front shouts out a song, he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll do that one for you." Is it very, very dynamic?
Yeah, you know, we've often seen a sign saying "Marry me," or you know, like it's me, John. You know, it's John's birthday, and he'll just change, go off piste.
Yeah, fantastic.
He does have a lovely habit of morphing songs into each other. So even if you think you're in one set place, suddenly you're in another song halfway through. So,
but that's amazing as well. And I think what stands testament to that of a show is if there's probably fans who'll go to 3 or 4 shows during that tour, and it's not the same every night, the same set list. It's dynamic, isn't it? Which offers a lot more as well.
Absolutely.
Definitely keeps you entertained and involved in the show because you never know what's going to happen.
Fantastic. I think Tim Moore has another question he's going to jump in with.
I do, a couple actually. Chris, it starts with you and goes to Mark at the end. You're wearing 2 hats, 3 hats counting monitors, as you know, engineer and production manager. What are your considerations on how you approach your day with that in mind? And I'll throw the end to Mark. Do you guys have an understanding of what each other's doing, and if one of you gets underwater, how do you back each other up?
Yeah, I think Mark and I can both answer both of those questions actually. But yeah, I have a day job and I have a nighttime job. They are 2 very separate jobs. I'm incredibly lucky that I have talent like Dave and Charlie who look after the PA system and prepare it and tune it in such a way that it's really not a concern that I've got to spend hours during the day tuning the PA, because it really is. I do walk around, I do listen to the PA, and we make adjustments if required, but usually they're very minimal because we've spent a long time working together and have an understanding of what we need to do. So yeah, very much it's a daytime job of production management, which is, you know, dealing with people and problems as they come up, as well as dealing with the advance and keeping the whole thing ticking over. And then the most amazing privilege of being able to be part of the show, which I think is a really crucial thing for me, because I don't know that I come from that creative side, so I'm not sure I could be just one and not be able to kind of enjoy the fruits of our labour. And I really do feel that mixing front of house is a way of enjoying it. Like, you know, we put all this effort in to build this through whatever weather conditions and whatever load-in conditions, and I get to stand and feel the crowd and enjoy the job that I do. But I couldn't necessarily do that without the team that I have behind me and around me, because of course you effectively abandon the production office at those times. So you rely on the team that you have in the production office, and you know, I have Helen with me, and I've had production assistants and such like that help tick over the production office during that time. But in the same respect, can't do it without a tour manager running everything whilst you're out doing the show. Mark?
It's about team. That's, you know, it's that great saying of, you know, there's no I in team. It is a team, and if one of the cogs is slightly out of kilter, everybody knows it. So, you know, it's the team running smoothly.
Right. Very good. Thank you. Andy?
Fantastic. I'm just going to jump to this image here, because I've just thought, with regards to support bands and support acts, is, like you said, it's all downstage here. This obviously comes on. So the support bands, they play on this downstage edge. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's more of it than you think. There's a good 18 feet of depth there, but yeah, we wouldn't be able to get an orchestra up there, that's for sure. Although we have managed to fit all sorts of things up there. People have been very creative about how they run their sets to join us. But yeah, Ed's riser disappears off and comes back on.
It moves. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. And I'm going to bring in Dave now. Last but no means least, and I'm going to just talk about your world down here, because when I was looking through these photos, obviously I can see a video wall up here. So I'm guessing that you are hidden somewhere down here?
Yeah, I'm over the other side on stage left, right there. So unlike most people, I've never really seen the show. I've got a video feed, a quad view video feed, so I can keep an eye on what's Ed's doing in terms of like string breakages and stuff. That's the screen that's black in that picture there. But
yeah.
They send us a quad view so we can keep an eye on what he's doing, whether he's having problems or whether he's broken a string or anything like that. And I'll then work with Trev, the guitar tech, and Chris at front of house to resolve those things. But yeah, we quite happily hide in our little world under the stage and have a jolly old time, really.
Fantastic. And I'm looking at the Chewie setup here. Is that correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what you actually see on stage with Ed is the remote pedal. So obviously he controls everything. There's no quantizing, there's no time signatures or pre-programmed BPMs. Everything he does is completely live. So if he presses a button slightly out of time, you will hear it. He doesn't do it very often. He's amazingly consistent with it all. But yeah, that feeds back to that rack, and within there we've got the Digico rack there, which is Chris's I/O we've mentioned, that does all the transmit and receive from front of house. All of our wireless is the Sennheiser 9000 series and 2000 series IEM. So we've got 5 guitar packs, 4 acoustics, which are 2 big, 2 littles. 1 electric guitar, then we have a main vocal, a loop vocal, and a spare vocal. So we can get all of our RF for the transmit side all nicely contained in one unit there, which makes life incredibly easy and obviously gives us the digital feed that we need. And then then you've got the 2000 IEM there, which does all Ed's monitoring and if we have any guests. And the rest of the gubbins in there is obviously, you can see the 2 laptops on the top. They're synced, which actually runs Ed's loop pedal is a custom written plugin that sits in Ableton, controlled by the pedal there. So everything you can see there is the RME, the audio interface. There's a optical MADI switcher there for our AB switchovers, as well as video control stuff, so we can feed back things to his video screens. So he's got his VU meters and his all of his waveform editors and stuff like that. But it's fantastic for such a large scale of show. Basically the entire backline, which he uses, is that 1 rack plus the guitars and our toolboxes. That's pretty much it.
Fantastic. And it's a completely digital signal flow, did I just hear you say? Was that?
Yeah, absolutely. This was one of the reasons why when as soon as we could, it was one of Chris's stipulations that we moved straight over to digital. So from the moment the acoustic guitar goes into the 9000 series, that then stays in the digital domain until it pretty much comes out the speakers. I mean, everything is either AES or MADI, all over optical. All the Digico is running full AES. So there's no conversions, because I think Chris mentioned earlier that when you start putting digital conversion in and going digital, analog, digital, you start adding latency. And the one very, very important thing about this system is it's as instantaneous as we can get it. So he hits the pedal and there is no latency in saying, oh, that's the record marker. So keeping everything digital not only keeps the signal flow clean, so everything going to Chris is as pure as we can get it. It's also the quickest transmission of the signal we can do. So everything was built from the ground up really for Ed.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for telling us that. And obviously you've got the guitar tech. Is it Trevor? Did I hear you mention before, Mark? I think.
Yeah, Trev Dawkins. A lovely, very, very, very intelligent chap when it comes to guitars and musical instruments. He spends a lot of time working with Ed and Chris, getting the sound and the tone of the guitars right, as well as, pretty much every song has a different tuning as well. You can see in the top of Trev's box there, that's his set list with color-coded tunings. So for every 1 guitar that's on stage, there's 1 backup in the same tuning. So it's not tuning 1 guitar for each song, it's tuning at least 2 guitars for each song. And then add into that a string break as well. You've suddenly got to restring a guitar whilst have another backup going. He's an incredibly busy man once the show gets going.
It is worth noting on that point is the guitars. What he does in the day for running the show is one thing, but each guitar is aged before before we use it on stage, a bit like Stradivarius did with violins, because a new guitar that hasn't been bedded in sounds so different to a guitar that's had a few hours of playing. And Ed plays vigorously. He really does give the guitars a hard time. So they age really quickly, but we can't afford for that aging process to happen on stage because it changes tonality. So Trev spends a lot of time with the guitars aging them, and one of those things is a tone right vibrating generator that sits on top of the strings and ages the guitar. He plays them a lot. More often than not, during sound check, he'll bring up a new guitar and say, "How does this one sound?" And you're like, "No, not yet." And it goes back for some more playing and aging from him. So there's quite a lot going on in his day beyond sort of actually preparing for the show that we're doing right there and then. And we have to be prepared for that because Ed has a habit of, it's not been so bad recently, he does have a habit of breaking guitars.
Right. What's the kind of aging, the process, the time from a new guitar arriving to kind of it being ready for a gig? Is there a rough...
about 90 hours of playing, isn't it? Roughly 70 hours, depending on. Yeah.
He tends to put the wobbler on there, and he calls it letting them cook, and he'll put them back in the shelf there, and he'll just bake them for about 20, quite a few hours really, and bring them out. Chris and Trev will test them, and then no, it's not quite done. Back on medium heat, you know.
Amazing! What a process! Fantastic. And then I guess let's talk about sort of showtime. So you've given us a fantastic overview, and we really appreciate of what it looks like to put a show of this size on. But then obviously Ed turns up. As Mark explained, you've given him his time, and is he kind of there sort of an hour, 30 minutes before a show, or?
Varies. It really varies. I mean, we've gone to the stage where we used to, not so many years ago, we used to be doing promotion for, on the day of shows. So predominantly me and Ed and Kevin, who you see there in the picture, we'd be out doing promo. But it got to the point where the shows were so big, we sort of stopped doing promo on the day. But, he normally gets there, we try and get in there a couple of hours before. He might have some people to meet. He tries to sit down with some of the crew to have dinner. And then for the last sort of 20 minutes, he's sort of just geeing himself up, getting ready for that walk to stage.
Fantastic. Yeah, we've got some more images here. So obviously, backstage, Dave's having a little chat there. I guess that's Trevor, is it?
Yep.
Yeah, that's Trevor.
Fantastic. I think we've got another image of him here. So at this kind of point of the day, how is everyone feeling? What's your sort of, is the nerves there, or is it just you're so used to it now that it's just a well-run machine?
I don't think you ever lose those pre-show sort of nerves and jitters. That's part of the addiction to it, really. That 5 minute. I mean, what you've just seen there is we got very much into a routine or a little ritual before a show, where obviously Ed would come somewhere near side of stage. He'd had his ears fitted. You can see him there holding his on-stage microphone. So what he's actually doing there is setting the level. He's happy with his ears. He's chatting to Chris just to make sure everything's all right, and a bit of a joke. How are we feeling tonight? He's happy with the guitar. Everything's working. He needs that to have the confidence before he goes on stage, because it's instant. He doesn't go on and talk. He goes on and presses go, and the first note rings out. So this gives him a bit of settling and also, confidence before he goes onto that stage.
Yeah. That picture probably tells some more stories as well. That's Trevor holding his forehead going, "Oh God, he's changing this again."
Yeah, it's already changed his service,
yeah. He's probably listening to Chris on the microphone going, "Do you really want to put that song in front of that song?"
That one.
Trevor's like, "Oh my God, here we go."
Is there a obviously like a chat system for the crew? Because we've seen Dave on a talkback mic, but do you sort of use a matrix system or something so everyone can sort of chat during the show on the tech side?
Dave, you know more about the comms. From a traditional band and backline tech situation, we don't have to obviously have that, because it really is the audio running of the show is just Dave and I relaying front of house to back of stage. There's nobody else that needs to be in that loop. But in terms of the wider loop, Dave found himself in charge of wireless comms as well.
Yeah, so it'll be fantastic. You've had an in-ear in one ear chatting to Chris with your microphone, then you had 4 separate rings of comms on the other ear, trying to make sure, you know, all the communication worked there between lighting and video, and when a screen broke, or stage management actually calling go for the show. So it's one of those things. I don't think we ever chatted to Ed during the show. There was never any need. If he had a problem, he would chat to Trev, and then I relay that to Chris. But so once that initial show chat's done, that's talk back done as far as Ed's concerned, and then it would just be Chris chatting to my ears, and then I'd have a microphone direct to a shout speaker. So I think the one thing I shouted more than often was string, which means heads up, there's going to be a guitar change here. And then we talked through it, and then obviously all the departments like video had a wireless set of comms, stage management, lighting as well. Matt was on the wireless comms because they'd have to balance spotlights and, you know, key and video and bits and pieces. So there was tech chat, but as far as the audio went, it was literally me to front of house and then Chris to Ed top of show, unless he wanted to know the cricket scores.
All the football scores, yeah.
All the football scores, all the rugby.
The other important thing about the communications between teams via the wireless comms was that Kinesis thing. Those things coming in every night, they look very pretty, but if you get a bit of a breeze, then it may be a different story, because they're basically sails that come in and swing around. And they were spotted by some guys on either side of the stage who could say, they're starting to come in, they're looking dangerous, we'll leave them, or they're looking dangerous on the way back up, let's stop them. But then also there were enough other people on the comms that could spot these things that could make that comment if needed be. So there's a very much a safety of the running of the show about having the wireless comms.
Fantastic. That's the end of the slideshow. Thank you so much. You've given us such a great overview there in an hour of what it takes to put on a show of this size. So, like, really appreciate it. We just have to a quick shout out to Ralph Larman, who provided those photographs for us. Yeah, absolute pleasure to deal with, and fantastic images. So I'm going to just shut this down now and just hand over to Tim, who's going to handle a few questions. Thanks.
Absolutely. I have one. I'm going to try to read it as close to verbatim as possible, but one of our guests says they remember seeing Ed early on in 2011 when he would basically show up and plug himself in. And they're kind of wondering how the setup has changed since then. I'm imagining this means specifically to Chewie and his pedals, and how that transition happened, how you decided to go from, you know, stock pedals to building a custom system.
That's you and me, Dave.
Yeah, it's 2 of us. Yeah. You started it, so you can start this bit.
The early part, we used a Boss pedal that Ed had, that he'd learned his trade on. It compressed massively. It had a limited amount of memory and a limited amount of ability, and Ed used it to make extensive amount of loops, and you could feel the audio compressing. You'd lose low end and eventually start losing high end as well as he built it. So we started looking for something that would enable us to have more capacity so that it could keep building without it squashing in order to not give up. We found a couple of things that had that option with a couple of manufacturers who had them already made and in production, but they didn't feel right. And it's something we suddenly became really aware of. It wasn't just a loop pedal. Ed knew this thing, and it was very much about the feel of the pedal and where those pedals were. And actually there's a whole dance about what Ed does that we couldn't replicate with some of these other pedals. And Boss Roland didn't have an alternative for us. So we went away, very short versions, we went away and started building our own pedal that incorporated the skeletal form of these pedals. And whilst doing so, Ed decided that actually we could expand this and we could have more loops and we could try things. So we ended up, there were no manufacturers at the time willing to jump on board and give us a hand. So we went and did it ourselves. Chewie I was good. We had a lot of pain getting through it. We had a lot of shows where we had the other pedal next to it that Ed would jump on, but Ed was an absolute superstar. He always wanted to try it, even if he knew it wasn't quite ready yet, because he wanted to push this development on. And so Chewie I had its success, but Chewie II is when we got Dave involved to really to sort of clean up and make something that was rock steady and reliable.
I came on board when they were still using Chewie I, and just as a PA tech, and Trev was actually in the arena tour of Multiply, was doing all the switching, making sure the pedal worked, which was a singular system. So if the laptop fell over or any part of it fell over, that was it. It was a stop. Ed would go and take his guitar, do an acoustic number, and hopefully in that 2.5 minutes, everything was back working again. But he was an incredibly busy man, because then if a string would go as well, you have one central point of a person that was trying to manage all this. So when it came round to sort of the next run, that's when like me and Chris had a conversation, and development came of splitting that role, but also building in redundancies. And I have to say, we've had a couple of moments over 3 years, but we've never had a show stop situation. We've never had anything majorly like catastrophic happen, because we put the research in and managed to put redundancies into the system. So even if there was a fault, most of the time, if there was a fault, my favorite game was to tell Chris at front of house, did you hear anything? And if he said no, it was a success.
Very nice. That's awesome to have someone who's got such an idea in their head of how they want to perform, that you have to build proprietary equipment to do it and have the right team to do it. So kudos to you guys for pulling that off. That's awesome. Very awesome. So some of these questions we'll have to jump around a bit. We want to, take care of the audience, but one is, what's some of the craziest things that went wrong that you could have never expected to happen, and how do you recover from them during the show?
That's quite funny, because can I just say one that was directly from what Dave was just saying about the Chewie?
Yeah.
Was Wembley Stadium.
Oh God.
The first time we were in Wembley Stadium doing with Ed, and we Chewie won of the first iteration of it. It had been going well. Things had settled really nicely with it, and we'd got through the first show of Ed's ever performances in Wembley Stadium, and we got to the last song, which is Always You Need Me, and that's a big song in lots of ways, visually as well as audibly. And towards the end of him building the most complex part of his loops, the Chewie, the loop pedal, crashed and stopped. So we almost finished his show seamlessly, but we didn't. And we thought there may have been a problem with the system. We tried to find it, we couldn't find it. Very, very long story short, it turned out to be a strobe light effect that we'd never used before, that we'd added for the stadium show, that was actually affecting the power in such a way it was shutting down the computer. So that was a pretty mad one, and not really the place to find out.
Wow. Now, how did you come to discover that power situation and sussing that out?
We thought it was one thing, and found out on night 2 that it wasn't that thing at all, and then suspected it might be something else. So tested everything during the day, ran the song with those strobe lights during the day, and managed to crash the computer several times. So, funnily enough, audio won, lighting lost. Those lights were never switched on again.
Sorry,
Chalk one up to audio.
All right, the massive strobes that we didn't need anyway.
Yeah, kind of.
Nice. Okay, thank you on that one. The next one is the Divide World Tour started a few weeks after the album premiere, but how long in advance did you plan and draw out and build all of the assets for the tour?
I think I remember drawing in the November prior to that, drawing some stuff, and I know stuff was going on well before then.
Yeah, well before then. It takes a long time to put a show together, and the version of the show that came out in 2017 with the album was well underway in June the year before in terms of design, and it was very interesting to see the original designs to how the designs ended up, which is of course a process of showing Ed some visuals, him liking them and not liking them, and as Mark said, then moving on to the financial side of, you might like that, but you can't afford it, buddy, and so on and so forth that we went through. So yeah, I would say to do a show like that, and also the fact we had this ideal that it was going to move from arenas into stadiums with the same concept, that it was a good 12 months before that we started building it.
Or it's when we're in a pub and have beer mats, Chris.
Yeah, well, do you know what? Yeah, in theory, even a year before that, we talked about the next design, and it was beer mats and plastic cutlery. Yeah.
Nice. Mark, I got one for you here. Who comes up with the dad joke? Is that you?
No.
No.
That's Helen, I think. That's Helen.
Yeah, it was Helen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So, well, that's a good opportunity. You guys have all mentioned you have production assistants and things like that here. Is there? This may be a good time to give a shout out to some of those important people on pulling the show off. Who's your production assistant and tour manager assistants?
Oh, there are far too many people that we should give credit to, because everybody contributes massively to it. I don't feel comfortable mentioning anybody, but also to give a shout out
Fair
to
enough.
everybody, because there were a lot
Yes.
of people, and they're all, they all played their role, and they're all equally responsible. And it does, for me, titles sometimes can be a bit of an issue, because I'd equally like to give a shout out to the person that cleaned the offices whilst we weren't there overnight, which enabled me to come back and have a clean office and start working again the next day. So I think everybody has a very important role to play.
It's the same. It's the same in every business from top to bottom. If everyone's not, with the same goal, it's not going to work. It has to be a team effort.
Absolutely. And I guess that's part of, we touched on this earlier, Mark, that's kind of your process of adding people. It's, you spend half the time working, half the time being a team, and half the time that's more than two halves now, I've gone too far, but you have so much time spending with each other as people, you have to consider that. And I guess when you interview or talk to people, that's a really big part of your decision process.
I mean, I think it's about hopefully someone from the team knows the possible new person coming into the team. They normally come with recommendations. Do you know so and so? I met him on so and so gig, or I met her on this gig. She was doing that. So a lot of it is, people come into various departments saying, I found this person, I know this person, which is great. But it's, again, when they hit the Ed Sheeran team, it's a very different team to a lot of other people's team. We work very differently. We may have the same job titles as other people, but I think we're probably one of the smallest stadium touring crew ever in the world. That's not because it's just one man on stage. Even if we had a band that had only probably had 6 people into the crew, including the bands, they're tight. It's, we're a tight-knit family. A lot of us have been there a lot of years, and done multiple roles through those years, and sort of grown up and grown with Ed.
Very good. Very good. Andy, you see any more questions here? I've gone through my screen. Another couple that have come in.
There was just a few things about generally being on tour, I guess. What is the one thing that is always in your case, or in your production case, or your Pelly, or what can't you leave home without?
Bluetooth speaker every time. Yeah. I've got usually a couple of them hanging around, so if you're doing something during the day where you need to concentrate, you can just put on some tunes in the corner there, hopefully not disturbing too many other people.
Anyone else? Any fancy coffee makers or anything like
that? It has to be the coffee machine.
Coffee machine, right?
An inconsistent thing around the world, and you don't do milk anymore because you can't make that consistent. So a good black coffee.
Are you on about the Nespresso or Big Bev?
Yeah, Big Bev, yeah.
Yeah. The catering team that support us around the world have got this quite frankly astonishing Italian coffee machine. I think we've got 2 of them that follow us around there. So if you're having a really bad day, you can always go and get a proper coffee.
And yeah, Big Bev's not a person; it's the actual machine.
Yeah, it's the machine.
Yeah.
Fantastic, Mark. Anything that you can't leave home without?
My team.
Great answer. Great team. I love.
The best.
I think you nailed it with how small and how you've kept it, and it's so clear that you're so tight knit and work together so well, and it's so organic as well. And obviously that comes from Ed and yourself from that initial conversation. I find that fantastic. What is have any of you got a standout show that lives in the memory, like maybe the first stadium show you did, or a tour, or a city you visited, or anything like that? Is there anything that really stands out for you?
I'd say it'd be the one we did in Germany that had that 90,000 people. It was impossible to get to front of house. That for me is the one that stands out. I can't remember what city that was.
The Hamburg one.
Yeah, that one.
Big one, yeah.
At that racetrack, yeah. That one stands out for me, definitely. Just looking out the front of house tower and just seeing a sea of people and not being able to discern a person's face right at the back, I thought that was quite incredible.
Yeah, definitely remember that one. And delay tower power during support bands. And yeah, it was fraught with excitement, should we say.
For me, it can't be for reasons of there are lots of shows that blew my mind and took my breath away, and there are so many circumstances where the team pulled things out of the bag that just seemed impossible at the time that were noteworthy. But for me, it's a humorous thing that it takes me back to the very early days when we were doing small shows, and our biggest show we'd done was Brixton Academy, and Ed wanted to invite all his mates to do one particular song with him. So we had a whole raft of rappers turning up to do their verse, and Mark, because we didn't have anybody else, Mark was side of stage trying to swap microphones with these guys as they were running on or off, or even trying to find the odd one who'd snuck off to the toilet or was having a sneaky fag out the back during the song, which that song particularly would at that point would last about 21 minutes. But yeah, I remember that particularly.
I don't know what my best moment is. I think just for me personally, probably one of the first Wembleys where we had special guest Andrea Bocelli on. That was for me because I'd worked for Andrea as well, and sort of those two people coming together and doing the song, it was just spellbinding.
Okay. We never got Beyonce though, did we?
Yeah.
Bocelli out.
Fantastic. Well, we've rattled through all the questions there. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for joining us and just sharing us, just giving us a little insight into your world and everything that's involved with it. There's so much information there. It's been fantastic, and the description of the images and everything that you all do. Thank you so much, and let's hope we can all get back to doing it soon. And yeah, fingers crossed. I hope you're all getting through this all right, and we just want to say thank you so much for taking part of this. It's been great. Yes. I'm going to pass back to Tim.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, thanks from me too. Lots of great information, and we really appreciate you joining us, and we appreciate the audience for joining us as well, and sending your questions through. We'll be doing one of these every so often, and we hope to see people come and join us on those. Sennheiser.com/seminars. And guys, thanks for joining us. Guests, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks.
Okay.
Yes.